I need to tell you something that sounds insane but is completely true. The economy doesn't exist. Not in the way you think. Not as a thing you can touch or measure objectively. Not as a machine that runs on fixed laws like physics. The economy is a story, a shared hallucination, a collective agreement to pretend that certain things have value and certain rules apply. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is what economists and philosophers have understood for centuries. The entire system runs on belief. When belief holds, everything works. When belief cracks, everything collapses. The dollar in your pocket is worth something because everyone agrees it's worth something. The moment that agreement breaks, it becomes paper. The bank that holds your savings doesn't actually have your money. It has numbers in a database and the collective belief that those numbers mean something. The stock market values companies at trillions of dollars based on stories about their future. Those stories can change overnight, and trillions appear or vanish. Today, I'm going to pull back the curtain. I'm going to show you that everything you think is solid about the economy is actually performance, theater, a story we tell together to make civilization function. This isn't nihilism. Understanding that the economy is a story doesn't make it less real in its effects. It makes it more comprehensible, and it reveals something crucial. If the economy is a story, then the story can be changed. 1. The money fiction. Let's start with the most basic element. Money. What is a dollar? Physically, it's a piece of paper, or a number in a computer. It has no intrinsic value. You can't eat it, you can't build shelter with it, it does nothing. A dollar is valuable because everyone agrees to treat it as valuable. That's it, that's the whole thing. This wasn't always so obvious. For most of history, money was made of precious metals. Gold and silver coins had value because the metal itself had value. You could melt the coin and the gold would still be worth something. But even then, the value of gold was a fiction. Gold is a soft metal with limited practical uses. Its value came from collective agreement. Humans decided gold was precious, so gold became precious. Modern money isn't even pretending anymore. The dollar hasn't been backed by gold since 1971. There's nothing behind it except the full faith and credit of the United States government. What does that mean? It means, trust us. The entire monetary system is a trust exercise. We trust that the paper will be accepted tomorrow. We trust that the numbers in our bank accounts represent something. We trust that the system will continue. When trust breaks, money breaks. Hyperinflation isn't primarily about too much money printing, it's about trust collapsing. People stop believing the currency will hold value, so they rush to spend it, which makes it lose value, which confirms the belief. The story falls apart. 2. The banking illusion. Here's something that surprises most people. Banks don't have your money. When you deposit $10,000, the bank doesn't put $10,000 in a vault with your name on it. The bank lends most of it out immediately. Your account balance is an IOU from the bank, not actual cash sitting somewhere. This is called fractional reserve banking. Banks keep a fraction of deposits as reserves and lend the rest. The reserve requirement is often around 10%, sometimes less. This means if everyone tried to withdraw their money simultaneously, the bank couldn't pay. There isn't enough physical currency. The money exists as accounting entries, not as cash. But wait, you might say, I can go to an ATM right now and get cash. Yes, because not everyone withdraws at once. The system works as long as most people leave their money in most of the time. It's a confidence game in the literal sense. It works as long as confidence holds. When confidence breaks, you get a bank run. Everyone rushes to withdraw. The bank can't pay everyone. It collapses. The money people thought they had vanishes. This has happened repeatedly throughout history. It happened in 2008 when confidence in certain financial institutions evaporated. Banks that seemed solid on Monday were bankrupt by Friday. The FDIC insures deposits precisely because the money isn't really there. The insurance is a promise that the government will create money to make you whole if the bank fails. It's a backup story to maintain confidence in the primary story. 3. The central bank theater. Central banks are the master storytellers of the economy. The Federal Reserve doesn't actually control the economy through mechanical levers. It controls the economy through narrative, through managing expectations, through making people believe certain things will happen. Consider interest rate announcements. When the Fed raises rates, they're not physically doing anything to most transactions. They're changing a target rate that affects some interbank lending. The actual impact comes from belief. Businesses believe borrowing will be more expensive, so they borrow less. Investors believe asset prices will fall, so they sell. Consumers believe the economy will slow, so they spend less. The Fed's power is performative. It works because everyone believes it works and acts accordingly. Fed officials understand this. That's why they're so careful with language. Every word in a Fed statement is analyzed obsessively. The committee believes inflation remains elevated, versus the committee notes inflation has moderated. These tiny shifts move trillions of dollars. The Fed is managing a narrative about the future. If they can make people believe inflation will fall, people will act in ways that make inflation fall. Self-fulfilling prophecy. When Fed chairs speak, they're not reporting reality, they're constructing it. Their words literally shape the economic future because everyone adjusts behavior based on those words. This is why central bank credibility matters so much. A central bank that's trusted can move markets with hints. A central bank that's lost trust can make dramatic moves that nobody believes, accomplishing nothing. The economy doesn't run on money, it runs on stories about money. 4. The stock market theater. Nowhere is the fictional nature of the economy more visible than in the stock market. A stock price represents what people believe a company is worth, not what it is worth, because there's no objective measure of what a company is worth. Just beliefs about future profits, discounted to present value, filtered through emotion and narrative. Tesla's stock price has swung from $50 to $400 and back multiple times. Did the underlying company change that dramatically? Did its factories multiply and then disappear? Did its technology improve tenfold and then regress? No. Stories changed. Narratives about electric vehicles, about Elon Musk, about competition, about the future. The actual cars rolling off assembly lines were nearly constant while the valuation went on a roller coaster. When we say the market lost $2 trillion today, what actually happened? No factories burned down, no products disappeared, no workers vanished. Numbers in computers changed because beliefs changed. The $2 trillion was never really there. It was a collective assessment of value that shifted. The loss is real in that people feel poorer and act accordingly. But the trillions didn't exist as anything concrete that was then destroyed. Meme stocks made this obvious. GameStop went from $20 to $480 and back in weeks. The company didn't change, a story changed. Enough people believed the same story at the same time, and the stock price became that story. The market isn't discovering fundamental value, it's aggregating narratives. 5. The GDP performance. How do we know if the economy is doing well? We look at GDP, gross domestic product, the total value of goods and services produced. But GDP is a constructed statistic. It measures what we choose to measure in ways we choose to measure it. If a parent raises children at home, GDP counts nothing. If they pay someone else for childcare and get a job, GDP rises twice. The children aren't better off. The care isn't better. But the economy grew. If a company pollutes a river and another company is paid to clean it up, both activities add to GDP. The river is no better than before pollution, but the economy grew. If more people get sick and spend money on healthcare, GDP rises. Sickness is good for the economy by this measure. GDP measures activity, not welfare. It counts transactions, not outcomes. It tells us money moved around, not that life improved. And yet we treat GDP growth as the primary indicator of economic success. Political careers rise and fall on it. Central banks target it. Nations compete over it. We've collectively decided that this particular story, this particular way of counting defines economic reality, but it's a choice. Other measures would tell different stories. 6. The inflation narrative. Inflation is another story we tell. The official inflation rate is calculated from a basket of goods that statisticians define. What goes in the basket? How are quality changes handled? How is housing counted? These are choices. Different choices would produce different numbers. When your rent rises 20%, but the official inflation rate is 4%, the story doesn't match your reality. The story is constructed at a level of aggregation that erases your experience. And inflation expectations are self-fulfilling. If everyone believes prices will rise 5% next year, workers demand 5% raises, businesses raise prices 5%, and inflation is 5%. The belief created the reality. Central banks spend enormous effort managing inflation expectations precisely because expectations create outcomes. The Fed isn't just fighting current inflation, it's fighting the story people tell about future inflation. In the 1,970 seconds, inflation became entrenched. What does that mean? It means the story took hold. Everyone believed prices would keep rising, so everyone acted accordingly, so prices kept rising. Breaking the cycle required breaking the narrative, which required painful measures that forced a new story. Inflation is real in that prices change and purchasing power shifts. But the rate, the measurement, the expectations, the policy response, all of this is narrative. Stories about stories. 7. The recession reality. What is a recession? The technical definition is 2 consecutive quarters of GDP decline, an arbitrary cutoff of an arbitrary measure. But the real definition is a recession is when we all agree we're in a recession. Consumer confidence falls, businesses stop investing, workers fear layoffs, spending drops, the fear becomes reality. Recessions have strong psychological components, animal spirits as Keynes called them. The collective mood shifts and the economy shifts with it. In 2008, the financial crisis was triggered by a loss of confidence in mortgage-backed securities. One day, these assets were AAA rated and worth trillions. The next day, nobody trusted them. The assets hadn't physically changed. The story about them changed. The resulting recession destroyed trillions in wealth and millions of jobs. Real suffering, real consequences, caused by a shift in collective belief about what pieces of paper were worth. Policy responses to recessions are largely about narrative management. When the government announces stimulus, it's not just injecting money, it's telling a story. We're taking action, things will get better, have confidence. When the Fed announces emergency measures, the goal is to stop panic, to change the story from everything is collapsing to authorities have it under control. Sometimes the narrative intervention works, sometimes it doesn't, but everyone understands that managing the story is as important as managing the substance. 8. The debt fiction. Here's a story that reveals the fictional nature of everything. Government debt. The United States owes $34 trillion. This sounds terrifying. How can we ever pay it back? But who do we owe it to? Mostly ourselves. Much of the debt is held by American citizens, American institutions, and the Federal Reserve itself. And here's the deep secret. A government that borrows in its own currency can never truly run out of money. It can always create more currency to pay debts. But that causes inflation, sometimes. But the constraint isn't mathematical inability to pay, it's the inflationary consequences of paying. The debt isn't like household debt. You can't print dollars to pay your mortgage. The government can. The government created the dollars in the first place. Government debt is better understood as the private sector's savings. When the government runs a deficit, it creates financial assets that the private sector holds. The debt is the other side of the wealth. This is modern monetary theory, which is controversial but descriptively accurate. The constraint on government spending isn't money. Governments create money. The constraint is real resources, inflation, what the economy can actually produce. The story of government debt as a burden to be paid off misunderstands what government debt is. It treats the government like a household when it's actually the issuer of the currency. None of this means deficits don't matter or that unlimited spending is fine. It means the story we tell about debt obscures the actual dynamics. 9. The work fiction. What gives your work value? Not the intrinsic worth of what you produce. A TikTok influencer earns more than a nurse. A hedge fund manager earns more than a teacher. The market values don't track social contribution. Your wage reflects a story about supply and demand for your particular skills. That story is constructed by labor markets, credential systems, social beliefs about what's valuable. If society decided tomorrow that teachers should earn $200,000 and hedge fund managers should earn $50,000, nothing physical would change. The same people would do the same jobs. The story would change. But the market sets prices efficiently. The market sets prices based on current institutional arrangements, power relations, and collective beliefs. It's not an objective measure of value. It's a social process that we've reified into apparent natural law. Minimum wage debates reveal this. Opponents say the market determines the natural wage, but markets don't exist in nature. They're constructed by laws, regulations, power relations, and social choices. The wage you earn tells you what story the current system tells about your value. It doesn't tell you your actual worth. 10. The property fiction. You own your house? What does that mean? You have a piece of paper that says you own it. That paper is backed by a legal system. The legal system is backed by state enforcement. The state enforcement is backed by collective agreement to obey laws. If everyone stopped believing in property rights tomorrow, your ownership would vanish. The house would still be there. Your claim on it would be meaningless. Property is a social fiction, a very useful fiction. It enables investment, trade, and planning, but a fiction nonetheless. Indigenous peoples around the world have encountered this fiction when colonizers arrived with different stories about who could own land. The colonizers' stories won because they had guns. But the conflict was between narratives, not between reality and fiction. Intellectual property makes this even clearer. You can own an idea, a sequence of notes, or arrangement of words, only because we collectively agree to enforce these claims. Only because the story says you can. When people say property is theft, they're making a philosophical point. The original allocation of property was arbitrary. Someone claimed something and used force to defend the claim. We've built elaborate justifications after the fact, but the foundation is narrative. 11. The confidence game. Here's what holds everything together. Confidence. The dollar works because we're confident it will be accepted. Banks work because we're confident they'll pay withdrawals. The stock market works because we're confident we can sell tomorrow. The economy works because we're confident in its basic stability. This confidence is fragile. It's maintained by institutions, by track records, by careful narrative management. Central banks, governments, and financial institutions spend enormous effort maintaining confidence. When confidence breaks, everything breaks. A currency crisis is a confidence crisis. A banking crisis is a confidence crisis. A financial crisis is a confidence crisis. The 2008 collapse happened because confidence in the financial system cracked. The system didn't physically break. All the banks still had buildings and computers, but the story broke. Nobody trusted anybody. Credit froze. The economy nearly collapsed. The response was as much about narrative as about money. Emergency announcements, dramatic interventions, bailouts designed to signal that the government would prevent collapse. The goal was to restore confidence before the self-fulfilling prophecy of collapse completed itself. It worked, barely. Confidence returned, gradually. The economy recovered. But the recovery didn't happen because something real was fixed. It happened because the story was patched, because enough people believed again. 12. The story can change. If the economy is a story, then it's not inevitable. The current distribution of wealth is a story. We tell ourselves it reflects merit, or market outcomes, or natural laws. But it reflects choices, legal structures, tax policies, power relations that could be different. The current concept of work is a story. We tell ourselves jobs are necessary for income, that certain work deserves more pay, that unemployment is personal failure. But societies have organized work differently and could again. The current monetary system is a story. We tell ourselves central banks must be independent, inflation must be low, debt must be constrained. But these are policy choices, not physical laws. Slavery was once part of the economic story. So was feudalism, child labor, company towns. The stories changed because people changed them. The economy feels immutable because we're inside the story. We can't see the narrative because it's the water we swim in. But every generation inherits stories and chooses which to continue and which to revise. The billionaires aren't billionaires because of natural law. They're billionaires because we collectively enforce property rights, tax structures, and market rules that allow billionaires to exist. The poor aren't poor because of natural law. They're poor because we collectively enforce systems that generate and perpetuate poverty. These systems aren't fake in the sense of being unreal, they're fake in the sense of being constructed, made, chosen, and therefore changeable. Conclusion: the real is fake. Here's what I want you to understand. The economy is made of stories. Money, banks, markets, GDP, work, property, all of it rests on collective belief. None of it is natural or inevitable or permanent. This doesn't make it less real. Stories shape behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. The economy is fake, and people really do starve, really do thrive, really do live and die based on their position in this fiction. But knowing it's a story gives you power. When someone says the market determines some outcome, they're hiding human choices behind a fictional mechanism. Markets don't determine anything. People trading in markets, within rules set by other people, produce outcomes. Change the people or the rules and you change the outcomes. When someone says a policy is economically impossible, they usually mean it conflicts with current institutions and beliefs. Very few things are actually impossible. Most things are just inconvenient for those benefiting from current arrangements. When someone says the economy is too complex to understand, they're protecting the priesthood. The economy is complex, but the basic dynamics aren't mysterious. They're just obscured by jargon and mathematics that serve to exclude outsiders. The economy is a story we tell together. Like all stories, it has authors who benefit from certain plot lines. Like all stories, it can be criticized, revised, and rewritten. You're not outside the economy. You're in it, shaped by it, participating in it, but you can also see it for what it is: a construction, a performance, a collective hallucination that we can choose to hallucinate differently. The curtain has been pulled back. The wizard is just a person. The machine is just levers and stories. What story do you want to tell? If this changed how you see the economy, hit that subscribe button, because understanding that the economy is a story is the first step to writing a better one. See you in the comments, and remember, the economy is fake. That's exactly why it can be changed.